1. The following is a continuation of the Sugarbeard saga. I know this is a little cliché to include a D&D night in a Neckbeards story, but this cringe-fest of a night is too immeasurably beardy to skip. This is a night where I get to know more of Sourbeard than I would ever have been willing to know. And also the night Sugarbeard makes an attempt at his first stand against his overbearing roommate. I also meet the other significant figure who befriended Sugarbeard on the side, and like me had been carefully working out his good features. It had been a little over a month since the last time I had been to Sugarbeard's apartment. It was 2 weeks between seeing his room and my chem exam, and about another 2 weeks before Sugarbeard felt he'd amassed enough players to get a decent game going. Sugarbeard invited me over early, so I understood character creation, since it was my first time. He was into the extended lore and wanted me to have all possible options, giving me all the officially recognized classes and races that weren't homebrewed or broken. I was entirely overwhelmed, and he was ecstatic, going on and on about each unique class and race and how important a backstory was. I told him I need to read through some of the books and charts he'd given me and make some decisions. He then went into suburban mom mode, buzzing around, cleaning the living room, preparing snacks for the other guests coming, and popping up periodically over my shoulder to ask what I was thinking about. A little time passed, and some of the charts got mixed up when I was selecting my race. "What's the halfling a mix of?" I asked, rifling through the papers. I heard the sound and smell of Sourbeard's door flying open.
"This is how much of a newbie you bring?"
he snapped.
"She didn't even listen to you earlier."
His appearance has gone through some stark change, so had his smell. While before he had smelled like a 4th grader's lunchbox they forgot to empty over the weekend, he now had an added fragrance which I can best describe as sour milk and wet sheep. His acne was substantially worse, bright, angry red with irritated whiteheads. The biggest change, though, was around his belly. It looked as though he had put on nearly 20 pounds. I was disgusted and confused at the same time. I had never seen someone put on that much weight in a single month. "Whoa," Sugarbeard stuttered. "We all have to start from somewhere."
"That woman,"
Sourbeard said, pointing at me disdainfully,
"is trying to take more away from us men. This is our hobby. She doesn't belong here."
"Didn't you tell him he can invite over who he wants?" I said, noticing Sugarbeard was shaking slightly.
"I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to bring someone who didn't care about D&D enough to learn the basics."
And here he used a rather vulgar but remarkable term, which I am not able to repeat. Sugarbeard was completely shaking now, but it wasn't fear, it was rage. "Leave us alone," he hissed, trying to keep control. "She's a good person, and I won't let you call her things like that. You're not playing tonight. There's another woman coming too, and you can't talk to her that way either."
"You fucking white knight."
Sourbeard literally spat at him. Luckily, he missed.
"You know you'll never get a woman."
He stormed off. "Well, at least I have friends," Sugarbeard yelled after him. The door slammed again. Sugarbeard sort of collapsed on the couch. He had gone pale and was breathless from the emotion of the ordeal. I sat next to him and gave him a small shoulder rub. "You did well," I tried softly. "I don't know yet," he tried. "He could become more bitter. He could get worse." I nodded, trying to be understanding. "Can we create your character to distract me?" he said, a little hopeful. Just as I finished with my character, another 2 of the people Sugarbeard had invited showed up. Kent and Hans. Kent had dark hair, a lanky shape, large nose, thick glasses, and a wicked sense of humor. He was obsessed with comic books and analyzing your opinion on things. He was a psychology major, and it showed. Hans was a very quiet, stocky guy with thick, curly hair. He let hide most of his face. He got his nickname from his love of Star Wars and other sci-fi. "Ah," said Kent, coming in. So, we have a total of 5 players, huh? Good number. Sugarbeard looked away. I kicked Sourbeard out, he admitted. His anti-woman issues got too much. Oh, I thought his internet lady friend would make it better. Sugarbeard covered Kent's mouth as best he could with their 10-inch height difference. I was deeply intrigued, but Sugarbeard's terrorized expression at the moment told me not to ask. There was a brief moment of silence. Suddenly, Kent grinned, bent down a good bit, and whispered something in Sugarbeard's ear. An expression I'd never seen before spread across his face. A small smirk and his eyes gleamed. I should be fair as DM, though. Hans looked as confused as I was. That's not what I meant, Ken smirked just as much. I mean with your quick imagination. I'll teach him something if Mel approves. Just then there was a knock at the door, who I assumed was Mel. I opened the door to find a full figure taking up the doorway. I was enveloped in an unexpected hug and spun around suddenly. Oh, you did it, Sugar. I'd told you you'd make another female friend eventually. Mel was a big woman who didn't like shying away from people staring. She wore her hair out, big and natural, tied back with a neon pink headband. She wore a zebra dress that looked super comfortable. She was a trans woman and had a very motherly warmness about her. I was very glad to have another woman and LGBT person around for the night, if Sourbeard was going to come back out. She sat me down, mussed Sugarbeard's hair approvingly. And did you get this one by being co-workers like you did with me? Improving every day? Sugarbeard blushed hard and then pulled the two of us into the hallway. Kent and Hans followed behind us. Sugarbeard carefully shut the door. I want to warn you. You know the other roommate I struggle with. The incel? Mel said excitedly. Do I get to meet him live? Well, he was really a jerk earlier to Kit. Oh, come on, Mel whined. I'm a tough girl. I want to mess with him. Then glanced at me. I'll defend Kit. Don't worry. Kent plucked up. Actually, Sugarbeard is going to mess with him tonight. Mel, Hans, and I looked at him in shock. Yeah, Sugarbeard said sheepishly. I'm going to try to make him feel what being a woman is like through his storyline. I was hesitant, based on some of Sugarbeard's old-fashioned views, but needed to see this unfold. 2. Okay, so I'm not necessarily proud of the contents of this post, but I think me telling this story is going to be therapeutic for me. And maybe we can have some good laughs. My Neckbeard journey begins like many Neckbeard stories do, a grandfather who teaches karate. I watched a lot of Power Rangers in my early childhood and loved every second of it. What really captivated me was the stunts and fight choreography. I later learned what it was called, martial arts or karate. In particular, I was absolutely enraptured by the fighting discipline. It was like a dance used to beat someone into the dirt. From that day forward, it became an obsession that persists to this very day. Fast forward a bit, and I'm in elementary school. That's when the next symptom manifests. I'm introduced to and fell in love with anime. The show that created this monster was, no surprise, Pokémon. Since my introduction to this show and game, I was, for all intents and purposes, swept off my feet. It was a pretty popular franchise among my peers, so it doesn't seem too terribly out of the norm. It was around this time that I started exhibiting other behaviors of the typical neckbeard, pestering girls who aren't even interested in getting to know me, just silly crushes, nothing I ever considered seriously acting on, poor hygiene and not taking rejection well, and dressing in clothes that made everyone convinced I was an alien pretending to be human. To add some additional context, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is a high-functioning form of autism. Moving on, I began indulging in various anime like Mobile Fighter, G Gundam, Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball Z, Rurouni Kenshin, and the Tenchi franchise, etc. I still indulge in anime, but my zeal for it is greatly diminished, being that I'm 29 and got introduced to live-action shows I enjoy, Letterkenny, The X-Files, Scrubs, etc. Fast forward some more, and we reach my middle school years. One would think I'd have at least one girl that I would badger non-stop for affection, but surprisingly I didn't. I've had a lot of crushes, but still nothing I seriously tried my luck with. Just appreciated at a distance. I had a crush on this Korean girl in 8th grade, but I didn't even bother trying because I had been beaten down enough by the opposite sex to not even think about trying out of fear of being called a creep. Fast forward to high school, and things got a little rough. Now, around this time, I only remained in said high school for 1 year before moving back to the Midwestern United States. I was in Colorado Springs. So in freshman year, I run into a girl who compliments me on my Naruto headband I was wearing around my waist. American schools don't like kids wearing hats for some reason. We carried out a nice conversation and went from a common interest to friendship to romantic relationship. It crashed and burned, no thanks to either of us. It's unusual for something like this to happen to a neckbeard, but it happens to others and it happened to me. I remember feeling so elated when we first started dating, but it was a collaborative effort that ended the relationship. For the sake of staying on topic, I'll only disclose what I did wrong. I was 15 at the time and concerned about appearances. I wanted to look tough and mysterious to impress my girl, so I would act like an edgy douchebag. We were both pretty reserved and never really opened up to each other, but that didn't excuse my behavior. She started acting out, and I blamed myself for it for so long. I stopped feeling sorry for her after finding out some other things from her friends, but I digress. I almost forgot to mention the anime club. What more needs to be said? It was a club of fellow anime enthusiasts, which I quickly and eagerly joined. I probably don't need to mention what this crowd was like, but I will anyway. Think of every neckbeard and legbeard stereotype, and that describes nearly everyone there. After freshman year and moving to Iowa, I went to a rural community high school. It was here I decided to change some things about myself. There was a girl I had an on and off relationship with up until I was 17. She was more of a practice girl than anything. My interactions with that girl grew more and more sexual until we finally had full-blown sex. It was the experience that I treasured more than the girl to whom I lost my virginity. I never really considered her that serious, and I wish I could take that back, because she didn't deserve to be used like that. How I treated her is one of my biggest regrets. But she's not the one that I badgered for a date. Her name was Kelly. She was a slender blonde with the sweetest voice I had ever heard. I thought she was the most beautiful girl I'd ever laid eyes on, and she was into anime and extremely smart to boot. Let the embarrassment commence. I wanted to ask her to the homecoming dance, but she was already dating someone. I was so shattered. I even cried in my algebra class. I regret to say math wasn't my strong suit. The next week, she was nothing but nice to me, only for the kindness to be returned with mean remarks and the staring of daggers. She literally did nothing wrong, and I treated her horribly. To add insult to injury, I started practically begging her to date me after she broke up with her boyfriend, which, looking back, was the epitome of slimy. I want to message her and apologize profusely for my horrible behavior, but I can't bring myself to do it, on account of things I said about her in confidence with a friend of mine. I hadn't quite outgrown my edgy phase, and I had said things about killing people that made my peers worry for my mental health. It didn't help that my father made comments like that in regards to former President Barack Obama. My reasoning was that if he could toss around vague and looming threats of murder without intentions, or actually acting on them, why couldn't I? I learned the hard way. Talk of my behavior eventually made its way back to my father, who, of course, acted surprised and repulsed to keep up appearances with the community. Yes, he's one of those kind of people. It goes without saying it was not a good day. It was a hell of my own creation, and I had no one to blame but myself. Nothing happened, and it was mostly swept under the rug. Did I learn my lesson? Why the fuck would I? If anyone's learned anything about neckbeards, it's that they're stubborn. College rolls around, and I dropped out of one major course to pursue another. This is where I met another fixation, Caitlin. Yet another slender, sweet and gorgeous girl. It was beautiful to me, anyway. I wanted to ask her out for a while, and was mustering up the courage, only to find out she was already seeing somebody else, once again, devastated. I cried in the car on my way home from school. It took me a long time to get over her. I tried to not look at this as her being cruel and attempted to try to establish a friendship, which she denied. That's probably for the best. It was hard, but I eventually got over her. I had a couple of female friends who were twins, Brooke and Brittany. Thankfully, I didn't ruin anything with them because I developed a sense of shame after being humiliated by my absurd amount of fixation. I remember taking Brittany to see a movie, just to hang out. And I suddenly started to feel those familiar feelings because she and her sister befriended me through thick and thin and put up with my bullshit. They never judged me, and I appreciated that I restrained myself because Brittany was seeing someone. I sat in the theater and let the feelings fade, coming to the realization that not everything has to be romantic. I was just lonely and wanted someone who wasn't going to leave me high and dry. Fast forward to now, and I've come a long way from the edgy and insecure dweeb I once was. I'm on meds and going through therapy, and I couldn't be happier. I haven't had a girlfriend since I was 17, but that doesn't really bother me anymore. I'll sometimes get little twinges of that familiar pain, but I'll remind myself that a girlfriend wouldn't be ideal at this point in life. I'm still trying to put my own life together. I got 3 IT certifications in my downtime. I'm not quite finished, but I'm improving. 3. Please allow me to introduce to you all the beard of the day, Baylor Beard. At one point, I considered him my best friend, and someone I truly cared about. To quote the mangaka Eiichiro Oda, even the sharpest sword becomes dull when pointed at a friend, and at first, I thought out of respect for that former friendship I'd spare him. But screw that, I want you guys to laugh, even if it's a bit at my expense. I'm no saint myself, so Baylor Beard is getting his focus. Now I have chosen the name Baylor Beard after several days pondering what to name him. These are the types of questions that keep me up at night. Should I name him Mexican Beard after his obsession with his respective Latino heritage? Mustache Beard, because he apparently thought it was still the 70s, and mustaches made you distinguished and gentlemanly. Botany Beard, because he loved plants, especially how they reproduce. All possible options, but I ultimately decided to give him the name after his favorite D&D monster. I suppose I could have named him Balrog Beard, since he was also obsessed with Lord of the Rings. He loved elves. But I chose Baylor Beard instead, since they are de facto the same creature, but legally not for copyright reasons. Gosh dang intellectual property. Ooh. The man did introduce me to D&D, and is honestly one of the only positive things to result from our friendship, which is sad, but hey, that's life. He would DM each session because he was an amazing storyteller who wanted people to appreciate the world of his unpublished novel. Yes, he wrote a novel which existed in a flash drive he carried around, and would rant about it. I kinda tuned it out because it was less a novel and more a self-insert power fantasy, based on what I recall. He liked to threaten the players by unleashing scores of Baylors to kill us and do acts of unspeakable evil to our corpses, each worse than the last. Yes, one time he threatened to summon a Baylor to whip my character into submission and drag his body to the underworld to violate for 10,000 years. Kinky. I want to take this introduction to Baylor Beard to really describe him. His voice was somewhat monotone, with a Mexican accent to it, since Baylor Beard not only was Mexican-American, but totally obsessed with it. Everything in his life would come back to him being Mexican and Catholic. The man hated atheists, and one told me how they're the enemies, and should stop corrupting society. He was big into politics, of course, and fancied himself socially conservative and economically populist. Sometimes he was consistent with his views, and others not so much. He thought all drug users should be arrested and murdered, and abortion should be outlawed and those who engage in it murdered as well. The personal reason for his hatred was, all the girls I like go for secular druggies. And maybe the girl of my dreams would be alive today if she wasn't aborted. Think of all the millions of potential girlfriends I could have if women weren't whores. Yes, everything revolved around him. He did, however, agree with gay marriage before it was legal here in the US, which goes against the Catholic belief. He said, the church should permit it so gay people don't live in sin. I know scripture and theology more than the Pope. As someone raised Catholic, that hurt my mind when he said, I wish I was a great dictator who overthrew democracy and seized control of the church and launched the next crusade. There were many nights we hung out in his smelly, mold-ridden basement, where he went on long rants about how only he deserved the right to rule. He did once tell me that he was willing to tolerate the existence of people who disagree with me, if it meant I had someone to play D&D with. The dude would never hesitate to insert his uninvited socio-political beliefs. And normally, those around him would immediately change the subject. Again, I was so lonely to have a friend that I would debate with him, which led to more than one unresolved argument. I will say that experience taught me debating politics and religion on that kind of level is, in my opinion, the equivalent of verbal masturbation, having less to do with presenting a constructive argument and prompting a mutually beneficial discussion, and more to do with someone trying to invalidate the opinion of those they disagree with, in a vain attempt to prop themselves up. I will say it was humorous when in community college I introduced Baylor Beard to another beard, Greekbeard, equally conservative and ethnocentric. The two spent quite a few occasions discussing their hatred of hippies and liberals. The only point they strongly fought against was their chosen Christian sect, Baylor Beard being Catholic, Greekbeard being Orthodox Christian. But their disdain of each other's sect was put to the side as they reveled in their anti-atheist rants. Now you may wonder why I remained friends with Baylor Beard for like 4 years between my high school and early college years. Well, my friends, I was bullied and ostracized in school, and at the time was not receiving the best treatment for my mental illness. My social skills at the time were therefore beard level, and led me to struggle to form meaningful social relationships. When I decided to befriend Baylor Beard, it did zero favors for me in this regard, as he too was a social outcast, and for valid reasons. I had seen Baylor Beard around school for a few years, and there had been talk of his oddity. My brother, a beard in his own right, would warn me about him and how strange he was. Apparently, since childhood, Baylor Beard had shown signs of arrogance and antisocial behavior. I had seen him occasionally at the high school anime club. I only went to the anime club a few times to try to make friends before I quickly stopped attending, due to bipolar disorder affecting my perception. Baylor Beard would arrive, clad in all black. I'm talking a black fedora, black trench coat, black dress shirt, black tie, black slacks, and black steel-toed shoes. Amongst all other students in Hot Topic purchases, he clearly stood out. He also would sit alone in the back of the room and would just stare. If you made eye contact, he would just stare into your eyes. It was off-putting, but again, I thought I could be his friend if I gave him a chance. As all I wanted was someone to befriend me and give me a chance. And so a few days after one of the last club meetings I attended, I decided to approach him during our shared lunch period and extend the hand of friendship. I walked up to his table. "Hi, I'm Mikola. I saw you at the anime club and thought we could have lunch together." His eyes lit up, confused. "Yeah, sure. I'm Baylor Beard. What anime do you like?" "I like One Piece." Shonen's for kids. I'm only into the most mature intellectual of anime. What's your religion?" I was thrown off. I was raised Catholic, but right now I'm reading up on Hinduism and Buddhism. He rolled his eyes and groaned. "Okay, Buddhism I get, because there isn't necessarily a god in that. I myself love a Tibetan Book of the Death. But Hinduism, I'm worried for your soul." I laughed it off and changed topics. "Yeah, well, I'm just trying to keep an open mind. Anyway, going to the dance Friday?" He looked up and down inside and began to rant. "Yes, but I'll be going stag, like a loser. The girl I like, her name's Rochelle. She is the reason I got into anime. All she watches is Inuyasha, and I don't like it. I heard she was fucked by a guy in a confessional booth. It's so disrespectful to Jesus. That douchebag probably seduced her. Why can't a good Catholic guy like me find a girlfriend to marry?" I was taken aback, but comforted him. "Well, you'll find somebody eventually." "No, I won't. I have colitis. That means I'll probably get ass cancer and die. And if I don't, I'll have a poop bag. Who wants to marry a guy with a poop bag?" I tried to make him feel a little better. Well, let's go to the dance together as friends. At least we can go as pals. Man, I wish I was gay. Then at least I wouldn't die alone, but the church wouldn't let them marry. It's not fair. Our conversation then progressed to his opinions regarding LGBTQ activism and produced this quip from Baylor Beard. I love going to pride parades as an ally, but everyone thinks I'm gay and I'm not. If I had a wife, I would keep her up at night. Over the following lunch periods, he would share his ideas of the ideal girlfriend. She has to be Japanese and Catholic, skinny with small boobs. Luckily, they all have those, and red hair. I would love to find a girlfriend with red hair who isn't white. But I guess she could dye her hair. At that, I laughed at the ridiculousness, and he continued to relate his troubles. 52. 52 what? I asked. 52 girls have rejected me. I only had one girlfriend ever, and that was for a week at Catholic summer camp. Since then, 51 girls have rejected being my girlfriend. I keep a record of the reasons. 5 were gay, the rest had boyfriends. Why must I fall for lesbians and girls who date douchebags? I patted him on the shoulder. It's okay, buddy. I've had issues getting girlfriends before. Baylor Beard was dismayed. You don't understand my burden. You want meaningless sex. I want love. Someone who does everything with me all the time. Marry me a little? Aside, over the years of our friendship, I would introduce my exes to Baylor Beard or discuss my love life with him. And he would always shame me for having premarital sex. Whenever we broke up, he would tell me, "It was all because of you, because you had sex. You were the only common denominator between your exes." It took a stranger I vented in to reassure me that relationships don't always work out and multiple breakups are common in one's life. Anyway, when the Friday dance came around, I met up with Baylor Beard with a black top hat instead of the normal black fedora, in his otherwise normal all-black suit. We both kinda just stood around drinking soda as we watched others dance. We were only there for a few hours until we left and started to walk back to our respective houses. We lived less than a mile away from each other. However, Baylor Beard shocked me when he said this. "Well, have a good night, Macola. I'm going to Chick-fil-A." "Oh, I thought you ate at the dance." "Yeah, I did. But I want to see if Rochelle is working there. I didn't see her at the dance and I miss her. Maybe if I go there, I can convince her to go on a date with me." I just patted his back. "Well, don't stalk her, but I wish you the best." He managed a grin. "Thanks for being my friend." He then started to walk off in his black boots. I later learned that he did indeed go to stalk that poor girl at work when I went on a school-sponsored trip. My high school would partner up with travel agencies where students could go to Costa Rica at a reduced rate. I was very lucky to afford to attend, and Baylor Beard was sad that he could not attend due to financial restraints. On vacation, I mentioned to our chaperoning teacher, Mr. O'Contraire, because he was a contrarian in all things. But I wish he was there so he could enjoy the experience. Weirdo with conservative opinions. Mr. O'Contraire was an ardent liberal, and later Baylor Beard told me they would get into shouting matches after class over abortion. He also hated me because I annoyed him, and he told me I was the worst student he ever took on a trip. On the same trip, the object of Baylor Beard's affection, Rochelle, also was confused as to why I was friends with Baylor Beard, and told me the following. "Well, I'm glad he has a friend, but did he tell you he stalked me?" I looked at her. "I knew he liked you, but what?" "Yeah, he would ask me out at school and would come by my work and kinda stare at me. I don't hate him the way O'Contraire does. But I want you to keep an eye on him. I heard he's threatened self-harm." These foreshadowing statements came to be true when Baylor Beard, allegedly, attempted suicide a month later. If I recall correctly, it was a half-hearted attempt to cut his wrists. At the time, I was super sympathetic with Baylor Beard, especially since around that time I attempted to hang myself. But looking back now, I believe it was Baylor Beard vying for attention, because I later learned his cuts were only superficial, and in the following months I learned that, other than a brief stay in a psych ward, he never followed through with therapy or medicine combat his diagnosed depression and autism. Furthermore, he stated he only did it because I couldn't get Rochelle because she only wants to date bad boys and not good gentlemen like myself. This attempt only further reinforced his family's belief that Baylor Beard was a tortured soul who the world misunderstood and rejected. Baylor Beard has 2 sisters who he would walk home to prevent them from seeing boys, and would often worry that the pop music they listened to would lead them down the life of a streetwalker. They, along with his mom, wouldn't call him out on his nonsense, and would usually just say, "People don't get you because you're a genius and autistic." His father, a heavy-set man with a mustache himself, Oceanside Beard, would go on long stories to me about how Baylor Beard was bullied in school and no one understood him. Basically, his family reinforced a belief to him that he was special. I did get to know Ocean Beard more, since he and Baylor Beard would always play PC games together. And despite his beardy tendencies, he was by far the more approachable and friendly of the two. Kinda like how Chris Chan's dad Bob was more engaging than his son. After the suicide attempt, Baylor Beard and I didn't hang out as much as we did in high school, and occasionally would go out on events, including my first anime con and Renaissance fair. On the first, he told me, "The only way I will ever meet a girlfriend is at an anime convention." At the Renaissance fair, he challenged me to a mock sword battle to prove my karate lessons taught me to be a superior swordsman. A week later, we were messing around with swords he and I had bought, and I accidentally stabbed my toe with a dulled rapier, superficial. He would often rant about how his glaive was the best martial arts weapon, and said the only reason he stopped martial arts was because he mastered his black belt. He moved away to go to college at a local Catholic university. He graduated a year before me to study botany. He loved plants and told me, "I love science. I couldn't be a doctor or a vet. If you experiment on humans, that's illegal. If you experiment on animals, PETA will come after you. But if you experiment on plants and kill a whole group, no one cares. I wish I was an asexual plant. That way I could have a child without having to have a wife or committing a sin." A very strange man indeed. He invited me to play D&D in his college group. I still didn't drive yet, so my poor mother or grandfather would drive me an hour away on a Friday night to do an all-nighter session. I regrettably don't remember a whole lot about the story of the campaign itself, only a few of the players, and not enough to warrant a whole separate story. I will say that Baylor Beard did not have a social circle until he formed a D&D group in college. I will give him that. He started his own college D&D club, and while others have done it, I am actually surprised he got people to play with him. Some were even seemingly well-adjusted individuals. I myself was not one of them, sadly, as I had been going through some personal issues and manic-depressive episodes. I would use the D&D sessions to vent my personal frustrations, and ultimately, Baylor Beard asked me to leave the group because of the drama I would bring to the table, mainly antagonizing players and lashing out. Those were neither my brightest or proudest days, and after my expulsion from the group, our friendship only lasted about a year until we had a falling out. I went on to enroll in community college and made a new group of friends, who I still talk to today. I honestly forget what exactly was the death knell in our friendship, but we had a heated argument. About 2 weeks later, my grandfather died, and I invited Baylor Beard to the funeral, since the two had met quite a few times. He came in his fedora and all-black get-up and tipped his hat to my grandfather's casket. We shook hands, and that was the last time I ever properly engaged with him. I've seen him around my town a couple times in the last 6 years at the train station, but I never spoke with him. I hope he is doing better, but I doubt it. Thank you for listening. 4. I'm a 32-year-old guy who travels a lot because of my work. I started again in February after a long pause because of COVID, and one of the guys in this new place introduced me to the great world of Warhammer 40k miniature game. I'm completely in love with this game, and I was thrilled to find a very small community in my city. I'm in a very conservative and religious country, so I contact them and set up a meeting in the public area of one of the guys' residential unit. The first meeting is a success. I only played one very long game and was completely obliterated, but I had fun. Here I met the subject of the story, Marco. He's a little younger, around 28, and is actually somewhat attractive, being tall, around 6'1", thin, but with a small beer belly, curly brown hair, and his best feature, beautiful green eyes. The problem is that the guy has a very unkempt appearance. He doesn't seem to brush his long hair, and it always looks dirty. Dresses with weird anime shirts, a scruffy beard, and smells a little... I don't think it's him, but perhaps unwashed shirts? But the worst is that he's been an asshole to me since we met. This is a selection of the shit he has told me in only 4 game meetings. That the reason I work out is to compensate for being a pygmy. I'm relatively short at 5'6". I've been trying and failing to enroll in a master's degree. This is my 3rd try, and he quickly points out that if I failed the first time, then I'm not cut out for it, and should quit. This one stung. I was close to decking him there. That I'm a grown-up man, and I should quit being so vain. When I told the group that I exercise about 4 or 5 times a week, he complained that I took too long to make my moves. Bitch, this game is complicated, and I'm new. That I should dress according to my age and job, this coming from Mr. Dragon-stamped t-shirt. After the comment about my master's degree, 2 of the other members, a lovely married couple about my age, called me sometime after our last game to apologize, and assured me that they would speak to him. Now, during this conversation came out the topic of me being gay, and that my last relationship crashed and burned because of my ex cheating on me. Out of the blue, they tell me that Mark was gay, to which I say, that's nice. Read, I don't give a fuck. Just get him off my back. Not 2 hours later, Markle calls me to apologize, saying that it was all in good faith and he didn't think I would be offended, never actually saying, dude, I'm sorry. And then he drops the bomb. He tells me that since I'm single again, we should hang out at his place and see what happens. In what universe does this guy live? I try to be as diplomatic as possible and let him know I'm not interested. But then this guy blows up, telling me I should be lucky he's interested in someone my age. That not even with the gym body could I keep a boyfriend, and that I'm just another superficial fucking, well, he used a word that rhymes with maggot. At this point, I'm fed up and told him that if I ever see him again, I'll beat the crap out of him. After that, I hung up the phone. The conversation was longer, but the rest was meaningless for this story. Not the most mature response, I know, but I'm tired of this guy. Unfortunately, I think I'm not going back to the game group, as all in there seem to be his friends, and they shared private information with him. Sadly, it seems that my Necron warriors will have an early retirement. 5. Okay, so this was this past fall, October to be precise. My mom, female 48, and I, female 22, like to go to garage sales for fun. Last fall, we were hitting up the neighborhood sale that had popped up for that weekend, and we were just winding down. We decided on one last house in the neighborhood, then go run some errands since it was morning now. At this garage sale, we found a few things, some nice sweaters for my student teaching in the spring, a wreath for Christmas decor, and some Pokemon toys. A stuffed Gengar and a Funko Pop Cubone. I thought they were cool, and I knew my brother could use one or both of them, so I go to buy them. Running the garage sale is a couple, maybe a little older than my mom, a lady a little older than that, and a guy my age that I'll call B. He wore a black and red Superman t-shirt and had stubble on his face and down his neck. His hair was greasy and kinda stuck to his head a little. He started talking to me once I came up and asked how much the toys were. He looked at me and said, "You know, I didn't think anyone would know what these were." And I was just like, oh yeah, I love Pokemon. I still play Pokemon Go. And it started a small 1 to 2 minute conversation about Pokemon. Then he complains about having to get up early to help pull out all the stuff they wanted to sell. Turns out the older people were his parents and his aunt. No judgment, I still live with my parents while I go to college. His aunt stares at me and says, "You can actually understand what he's talking about?" I nervously laugh and confirm that I do, and that Pokemon is pretty popular. I don't talk to him anymore, and he helps get my mom's stuff from the sale to the car while she's talking to him. and I kind of listen. He's 23, works 3 very low-maintenance jobs, is not going to college, and has no plans to move out. As we get to the car, his aunt yells, "B, get her number!" We laugh, then we get into the car. While my mom and I pull out, his aunt is chasing us down the driveway and waving her arms. She stops us, and my mom rolls down the window. Aunt looks at me and says, "Look, you're the first person who knows what he's talking about. Can I get your number to give him?" I stare, then look at my mom to see what I should do, who's smiling wide and nodding excitedly. That gives me a feeling. I don't like it. I don't want to talk to him. I should have said no. But I gave my number because I'm a huge pushover. Well, later we're in the store and he starts texting me. He immediately asks me out to ice cream for that same day. I say I can't because errands. Then he says, "What about Sunday?" I told him I have something else. Neither of my explanations are lies. We talk a little, and he seems very, very, very interested in taking things to the next level, talking about dates he'd take girls on and how many girlfriends he's had, until I gradually stopped texting him. The feeling I had got much stronger. He then finds my Facebook. May I inform you, dear listeners, that he only knows my first name? He sends me a Pokemon thing through Messenger. I don't respond. He doesn't add me to Facebook as a friend, though. Okay. I do take advantage to check his page. Literally, there isn't a single picture of him not wearing a comic t-shirt. I also see a friend, M, I go to school with who is a mutual friend, so I decide to ask her about him. My family had been pushing me to accept a date or just keep him on the back burner. Don't just mark him off as not an option. Just think about it. That feeling became a pounding in the back of my mind, and I pushed back saying, "No, I don't like him." Mind you, it had been bothering me a few days now, hitting me with literal, "What you doing? You up?" and trying to bring up inappropriate conversations in between any Pokemon discussions he tried to have with me. I told him I'm busy or I'm not ready yet. I'd rather talk a little while longer. We'd just met. He talks about wanting to visit me at college. So I ask my friend a couple of days after I get back to the dorm. She looks confused and asks, "He went to my high school, how do you know him?" I told her everything, then asked what she knows about him. Em looks at me and says gingerly, He threatened to shoot up the high school." Excuse me, what? He threatened to shoot up a high school. And that feeling suddenly turned into, wee-oo, wee-oo. Police had gone to his house and confiscated all his weapons. No one was hurt, but still. The reputation he had followed him to the local community college, and he dropped out after. He hadn't been able to keep a job either with the reputation and no degree. Needless to say, I blocked him. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Neckbeards in the Wild, episode 72. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it with all your friends and family. And for those of you who have done so already, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Right, let's see. No shoutouts today. Well, one later in the week. Actually, I think it was one tomorrow on the 11th, as I recall. But let's see, Hellfreezer's question of the day. In keeping with my True Blood t-shirt that I happen to be wearing, it's the first thing I grabbed. And I was like, ooh, question, I could do that. Right. Hellfreezer's question of the day. If you had the opportunity to become a vampire and live forever, would you want to? Now, you'd have all the classic vampire restrictions, like you have to be invited into somebody's house, you got sunlight, you're not vulnerable to garlic or any religious symbols, unless you believed in it when you were alive. Atheist, I'm golden. You can't eat food, but you can drink drinks, including blood, obviously. Would you go for it? Bearing in mind that your loved ones would grow old and die, and you'd be living forever. And with that, that's depressing, isn't it? It was meant to be fun. Oh, well, and I'm aware of the irony that I'm looking so rough when doing a Neckbeard video, but I like a little bit of stubble, what can I say? And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening. And I think that camera's at a bit of an angle. We'll just tilt ourselves this way. Yeah. Just tilt yourself when you're watching. It's fine. It's fine. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.